Welcome to the Sharky Show, the greatest sharkadoodle-doo ever created by God and gifted to mankind. The Sharky Show, baby. 1-800-449-8255 from the fabulous golden EIB Sharkraphone. It's not a mere microphone, you guys. It's a Sharkraphone. For today, I'm going to talk about, an album that really isn't one of the greatest albums ever recorded, but it's definitely one of the most interesting. When I bought this album, I bought this vinyl. I think it was at the Rhodium in Torrance. I'm not sure. But I took it home and played it, and I hated this album. I was about 1985. I played the whole album over and over trying to like it. And I was like, I like David Bowie. I love the experimental vibe of everything he does. But in the beginning, when I first tried to adapt onto the Berlin trilogy, and of course, I consider Station to Station from 1976 kind of part of the Berlin trilogy, but not really, because Station to Station, I believe, was recorded in the United States, Los Angeles, and the album Young Americans, which is such a killer album, in 1975. I guess those two albums, which are very different from each other, those two David Bowie albums aren't really a part of the Berlin trilogy. Low, Heroes, Lodger. Scary Monsters isn't really a part of it, and Station to Station from 1976 really isn't a part of it. But I still consider everything from Station to Station to Scary Monsters, those 5 albums, for me, Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255 on the fabulous Clark the Shark Show. I consider those 5 David Bowie albums all a part of like the same thing. Many of you out there might disagree and say, come on, Sharky, those bookends, they're not a part of the Berlin trilogy. But I'm like, yeah, I love Scary Monsters and Super Creeps the same way I love Lodger and I love Low and Station to Station, 2 albums that are completely different. I mean, completely different, but I love them one and the same. But I grew over time with evolution to begin to love this album, David Bowie, Heroes. Took me a while, you guys, I'll admit it. But gradually, I began to discover things about this album that I really liked. Now, I don't know if this is going to get 5 stars. It'll probably get 4. Who knows? Maybe it will get 5. But my scratchy vinyl of this sounded great. I had this old record player in Redondo Beach, downstairs at 251 Paseo de Gracia, down in that middle room. Of course, my brother Bert, facing down the dungeon at 251. Bert's down to the right, and then my brother Huck is to the left. And then when my sister Kathy died, of course, Foo and Hagen came to 251 in 1990, and they would share the middle room down there. But that room was the studio of Clark the Shark, where legend has it Clark the Shark would tear holes into speakers with all this electronics. And I supposedly invented grunge. It was me, Clark the Shark. I mean, forget Iggy Pop and those guys. Forget them, man. Forget Black Flag and Greg Ginn. Forget the Germs. Forget everything you know. Clark the Shark invented everything because I, Clark the Shark, say so at 1-800-449-8255. But then they stole it all from me and gave it to some other guy from Seattle. Some fucking douchebag that later shot himself or something. Who gives a fuck about that guy? At 1-800-449-8255. For I, as everybody knows, am the most fabulous, amazing shark that you will ever find in the universe. The greatest shark of them all. Right here from the golden EIB Sharkerphone, where I'm talking about this. Some people give it a 5-star album, David Bowie, Heroes, 1977, when I was just 12 years old. Me, Clark the Shark, the fabulous reviewer on YouTube of albums, because no one knows them like me. Because I was a connoisseur of vinyls, and I had an old record needle at 251 downstairs. You know, just me, Sharkadoodle-doo. There's only me in the whole universe for you. And when it comes to David Bowie, great albums, I'm usually the expert. In the late 70s with the Berlin Trilogy, I'm still pretty darn good. You know, I know these albums too. To me, these aren't as good as Hunky Dory, The Man Who Sold the World, or Ziggy Stardust, or Pinups even. Those are the real David Bowie albums to me, Clark the Shark. But, you know, I love, is this Oxford? What is that? Who's this guy? He's a professor from Oxford. Philip Glass. I don't know. Tony Visconti, I know, has a lot. He has a lot to do with Bowie albums. And Beauty and the Beast. 1-800-449-8255. You know, when I heard this song when I was 20, 21, I didn't like it, Beauty and the Beast, but I grew over time to love it. And of course, you know, Brian Eno from Roxy Music and his own solo fame is all over this album, you guys. I love me some Eno and Roxy Music. Joe the Lion, not one of my favorite Bowie songs. In fact, these first two songs aren't, but they're very interesting songs. But of course, track number 3, Heroes, one of the greatest songs ever recorded in rock music. Awesome. Killer song, you guys, Heroes, and you know it well. You've heard it plenty. And if you're born in 2002 and right now you're 21, in 2023, you've probably heard plenty of David Bowie, Heroes, but I want you to go buy some David Bowie albums, some of the early David Bowie albums, of course, you guys, but of course buy the Berlin Trilogy and all kinds of David Bowie. It's just always great shit. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show at 1-800-449-8255 from the golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's not a microphone, you guys. No way. I don't speak into a mere mic. I speak into a golden EIB Sharkerphone right here on the Excellence in Broadcasting Sharky Network. And Sons of the Silent Age, one of the greatest David Bowie songs. There's been a few people who've come to me and they said, Shark, your song Ripping Reason sounds like a sped up version of Sons of the Silent Age. And I'm like, shh, don't tell anyone. I'm like, you guys, me, Sharky, I never rip off Bowie. Well, sometimes. But Blackout, killer. I like that song. Good song, man. To close out side 1, in the interesting side, I mean, I admit this is the first David Bowie album in his whole collection where I was like, what the fuck is this? What is Bowie doing? I mean, Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion. I didn't really like those songs, but I like them now, you guys. They grew on me. Now side 2 is where we get into the Berlin shit. More than knee deep in the Berlin hoopla here, baby. V2 Schneider sounds like a Nazi Germany, something a Nazi would think of, but it's a killer fucking song. Definitely Bowie and Eno. And Sense of Doubt, you know. This whole album is dark, dismal, gray, cold, darker and colder and more miserable than like the Who, Quadrophenia. It's dark. I don't really find too much bright happiness on this album. And Sense of Doubt just gives me a sense of darkness. Moss Garden, interesting, you know, when Brian Eno is working with Bowie, you know it's fucking killer. And Neukölln, it's like, feel like going to a dark gray city in Berlin where the Soviets are going to just nuke us. You know, like Neukölln. And I really love The Secret Life of Arabia. This whole album, you guys, it really does have an atmosphere of keyboards, guitars. It's not the world's most melodic David Bowie album, no. But it has got some damn interesting moments all over the album, you guys. Just all these guys, man. Of course, Eno, important, dude. Brian Eno. And Robert Fripp. You gotta have him. And of course, Bowie has his standard guys, you know, Carlos Alomar and George Murray and Dennis Davis and Tony Visconti comes over from Oxford, always. And he assists on everything that David Bowie ever does, of course. I think even Tony Visconti had heavy involvement on Black Star, the final David Bowie album, which is such a fucking amazing, awesome album, you guys. You gotta hear Black Star, but you gotta hear this album, you guys. It's interesting. David Bowie Heroes took me, Clark the Shark, a while to like this album, and that might be a good thing. That might be good news because Bowie was really trying to do different, weird shit with the Berlin trilogy. When he's working with Fripp and Eno, man, it's fucking killer, you guys. Very atmospheric, ambient. Not super melodic, not super catchy, but I kind of fucking like that. Me, Clark the Shark, right here on the most amazing YouTube talk radio record reviewer, vinyl reviewer, whatever the hell I am. I don't even know anymore. All I know is I'm Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-SHARK. You just call 1-800-449-8255 from the fabulous golden EIB Sharker phone, where you're going to get the best reviews of David Bowie. David Bowie with Fripp and Eno and Iggy Pop. This was an amazing era, you guys. From Station to Station to Scary Monsters. These might be my favorite 5 David Bowie albums. That being said, they're not as good as those early David Bowie albums, man. The Man Who Sold the World, Hunky Dory. The album before The Man Who Sold the World, that acoustic Space Oddity, that album is so fucking weird. It's so killer. But there's something to be said for these 5 albums, man. I love the experimental David Bowie. And of course, after this, Bowie would get all pop with Let's Dance and Tonight, and he would really sell out and get commercial, and he would get huge. He'd be playing big arenas and big, gigantic places in the middle of the 1980s. Bowie put out 3 big albums that I don't really like. I kind of hate those albums, but it's David Bowie. Come on, I'll give him a chance. But you know me, Clark the Shark. I love me some Tin Machine, David Bowie. Those albums are awesome. There's great songs on, especially Tin Machine 2, but I love Tin Machine 1. But then in the 90s, when Bowie gets into Outside and Earthling, some fucking killer shit there. And that one album, man, dude, what's that album called? From like 1993. I like that album. It's interesting. Black Tie, White Noise. What an album. And of course, Heathen, good album. He's got a lot of good shit. Hours, good album, solid. I mean, the songwriting maybe could have been better. Bowie probably could have used Clark the Shark in the studio with him for Hours, but not on this one, baby. Heroes, 1977. David Bowie, where you and him can sit down with a cup of coffee somewhere in the universe, wherever David is. I know he's in heaven, you guys, and he'll sit down with you, and you and him can be heroes. Just for tonight, you guys. Just for one day. You're going to fucking love it. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show. I'm Clark the Shark, baby. And I just gave you the only review of David Bowie, Heroes. David Bowie, Robert Fripp, Brian Eno, Iggy Pop was probably hanging around. Who knows, man? But I just gave you the only review of this album that you will ever need. And I want you to buy this album because it's going to grow on you. Even Joe the Lion and all the shitty songs on this album, they're still fucking good. Because David Bowie is always interesting and he's always good. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show at 1-800-449-8255, where you just heard the word, the testimony, the glorious gospel from me, Clark the Shark, the greatest Sharky that you will ever find in the universe. I swear, ask anyone around, they'll tell you he's the greatest shark, better than all the other sharks. Well, maybe, I don't know. But 1-800-449-8255, you just got it, baby. David Bowie, Heroes. What an album. What an amazing, weird, eclectic, not really commercial, but it's got one of the greatest songs ever recorded. But it's got a lot of solid shit all over it. Right here on the Clark the Shark Show. Now I'm out of here, people. Peace.